The Den, where we are a source of inspiration by using our experiences, knowledge, and voices to empower women to move with intent. Today, we're going to be talking about sexual assault.
Hi, my name is Michelle, la entrenadora.
Hi, I'm Dr. Uchenna, the DR.
Hi, I'm Sherelle, the socially conscious social worker.
And I'm Dr. Evie Taylor, AKA the People's Professor, and together we are the MUSE. So as most of you are aware, April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So we thought it fitting to talk about that this week, because it's a problem that's so prevalent, and some of us may not even be aware of how frequently sexual assault occurs. But if we look at the statistics, every 73 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. And every 9 minutes, the victim is a child. So just think about that. So you're talking about just almost every minute, someone's sexually assaulted. And every 9 minutes. So within the course of this show, 3 children will be sexually assaulted. So I'm saying by your reactions, you're kind of surprised with that statistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
I was going to say that I worked in child welfare for 20 years. And I was a trainer. One of the jobs that I held was a trainer. And so when we talked about preparing the case managers to go out, the supervisors, one of the things to look for was children being, sexually assaulted. And at that time in the 90s, 2000s, it was 85% of children in foster care had been or was sexually assaulted. So it's a really, really high range. And I'm sure it's probably even more than that. But yeah, at that time it was 85%. And New York City is the largest foster care system right before LA.
And I knew statistically speaking, this is years ago, that 1 in every 3 women have been assaulted in their lifetime. 1 in every 3.
So now those statistics changed a little bit, but before we get into that, let's kind of define what sexual assault is, because people might have different versions or they may not even really know. So when we're saying sexual assault, it's just any sexual activity when consent isn't given, basically. So things like, rape, attempted rape, fondling or unwanted sexual touching, or even forcing someone to perform sexual acts, like coercion and things like that. And I just kind of wanted to bring that up because so many times I feel like in my line of work, I have clients say, well, they don't think it's sexual assault because maybe it was just, well, he just touched me. He didn't do anything else. Or, he tried maybe to rape me, but he didn't rape me. So a lot of times people just think that, oh, if it's sexual assault, it has to be rape, but all those things, even if it's an attempted rape or unwanted touching and things like that.
Right. It's interesting that you say that because I had a heated conversation with my husband because when the whole Me Too movement started, I'm guessing it's every man, right? So no judgment, but he was like, well, back in the day, all this was okay. I said, it was never okay. Boys used to grab our butts and, and all of that. And I said, even though, and I guess we didn't speak out even as young girls, right? I said, it was never desired. Nobody wants, if you touch me and I don't want you touching me, right? It is not okay. And it's interesting as a male and a female or, whatever, from that perspective, because as women, we have over centuries allowed ourselves to just be subjected to whatever. And all of that's assault. I mean, if you pull back the layers, it's all assault. I mean, I'm not trying to make it morbid, but I really did have this discussion. I had to really make my husband understand and make Eddie understand. If a woman doesn't want to be, you have to ask someone to touch you if you want to be touched. Even if it's you're walking in the club and somebody grabs your hand, do not touch me.
That's what I used to hate about clubs, because guys used to try to be slick, because if there's a lot of people and it's tight and then they squeeze by you or rubbing on you and stuff, I used to hate that because it's they'll act like they didn't do anything, but they really did.
Right.
And I want to just say something that Uchenna said about allowed, and I don't think that's how you meant it, but it's not even like because it's not even, it's an invasion. Because
No,
I don't even
right,
think that
right,
people can
right,
even say like, you
right.
know, something, and I wanted to add that it's not consented or you can't consent. Because if you're a child, right, you're not
Right, you
consenting
can't.
to
Yeah,
anything,
yeah.
right?
And I'm
My
so glad
argument
you said
is-
that, Sherelle, because that's like when we're looking at rape culture and why these things happen, and we try to prevent. And some of it's our language, and some things, you know, like historically, like, you know, like Luciana was saying, allowed. It's not that we allowed things to happen or women have historically allowed things. It's that things have happened to us and nobody
Right.
advocated for us.
Right.
So even young children, and I see this, that young children will be abused and then they're blamed. So I've had mothers say, you know, well, she shouldn't have been wearing those, you know, that nightgown in front of my boyfriend.
Right.
She's 8. She's 8.
Right.
That's the issue, you know, but it's always like victim blaming, right? They shouldn't have done this. So a lot of times it's not that things are allowed, it's that things happen and nothing is done to either protect the child, protect the woman, or to enforce the consequences on the perpetrator. And so I think historically that's what we've seen. And then we minimize things that happen. Oh, well, who cares? It was just a slap on the butt. Well, I didn't want anybody to slap me on the butt, you know, but it's not perceived as a big deal.
I was a member of a team here in Houston, Harris County. It was actually the Child Fatality Review Team, right? And I'm not even going to get into the stories, but on what you said, Evie, it sickened me, and that's probably the nicest word I could use when we had to deal with mothers who had boyfriends or husbands, and they, oh God, they blame. And mind you, you did hear me say it was a child fatality review team. So that means these little boys and girls were dead as I reviewed their cases to identify what could have been prevented. And I have no understanding for, I'm going to say a mother, because I don't know what the statistics are, but I'm going to say the majority of times it's a male acting on whether it's a boy or a girl, right? And I listened or read transcripts over and over and over and heard stories over and over and over again of victim blaming of babies. And I mean, and that culture, I assume, and this is my assumption, I'm probably wrong, I assume these same people were victims themselves, right? Most of the time.
That's what I was gonna ask, is that seems like that would be the case.
Perpetuated. I mean, I'm not in social work, so I don't see it all the time like Evie and Sherelle.
They're survivors.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just when it's to a child, don't get me wrong, when it's to anybody but a child.
Well, I do want to talk about like the importance of education, because you know how I am about education, but let me tell you, you know, like going back to the stats, like you were saying, like when we're just talking about child abuse, you know, like 1 in 3. Right now, the current stats say that 1 in 5 women have experienced completed or attempted rape. So if we're just looking at rape, look at how big those stats are when we're just talking about rape. 1 in 5 women have experienced completed or attempted rape. And then when we look at the age, it's 1 in 3 of those experienced it between 11 and 17. So during their teen years. So we really need to be focusing on, you know, like the talks and conversations we're having with our daughters. And then 1 in 8 reported that the attempted rape or rape occurred before age 10.
What about not just our daughters? What about our sons?
I was going to say that.
That's exactly what I was now.
Okay.
I was trying to let those stats, you know, kind of resonate. You know, like you kind of think about that. So 1 in 5 women.
Yeah.
That's, if we had one more person on the call, that's one of us, right?
Right.
And so with men, 1 in 38 men. So 1 in 38 men have experienced rape or attempted rape, 1 in 38. And then very similarly, 1 in 4 of them between the ages of 11, 17, and then 1 in 4 occurred before age 10.
Yeah.
So you're looking at 1 in 5 women and 1 in 38 men. So even when we're talking about men, a lot of times they're excluded from the conversation, because when we're thinking rape, we're only thinking girls and women.
Yeah.
But it's happening to boys and men.
And you know what? Even with the stats being ridiculous to even think about. It very well even could be higher because everybody doesn't say it.
Doesn't report it, right?
Yes.
They do not.
Especially for men, because
Yes.
now for women, you know, people are becoming more and more aware of the stats and how common it is. But for men, there's even more of a stigma.
Yep.
And people say, he's a man, how can he get raped there? Oh, he liked it. You know, it doesn't matter. He was 10 years old. Ooh, you know, welcome to manhood, or things like that, you know, and they don't understand how traumatic that experience is. And so when we're thinking, you know, just about those stats, like what can we do? Like, what are some things to do? Like, you know, this is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. What are some preventive measures? Because there are things that we can do to prevent or decrease these statistics, right? And so one, like I say, you know, I'm always harping on education. Education is key to increasing awareness and things like that. One thing that I think is vital when we're talking about education is communicating with our children, you know, because we talked about like how over years, like once we're an adult, you know, like we're kind of, you know, we buy into this culture and things like that. But if we start our kids at an early age where we can start to communicate, the problem is we don't talk about sex. So when, you know, when we're talking about sexual assault and consent has to be given, well, what does that mean? How do I say no if I don't want to do it? Because some people don't believe that, you know, like when you're in a relationship, oh, that was your boyfriend, that was your partner, whatever. That's not rape. That's not sexual assault because y'all are together. And that's not true, but that's what people believe. So a lot of times people don't come forward because they think it's their fault or it's not really assault because they're in a relationship with that person.
Right.
Can I say something on the other side of that? I think it's very important too that we talk, I mean, our boys, we talk to them about if you have a friend, it's not okay to do anything without getting consent. It's not okay to think, oh, they meant yes. I mean, we are on the flip side. We don't just talk to our girls.
No, I'm saying our children. That's why I said our children.
But I'm just saying, but what I'm saying is we have to talk to boys who date. I'm gonna, in a traditional world, right? Boys who date girls, right? They hear all this stuff from their friends, right? So they don't, I'm not saying they don't know what's right or what's wrong, but it's not okay to just push up on somebody, right? It's not okay. Yeah.
But she's saying not to be the perpetrator. So, right. So you're educating about being not to be the perpetrator.
Let's talk about even like flirting, right? Because it starts there, like even before like touching. If you're constantly trying to call somebody, talk to somebody, try to flirt, and they keep saying, no, 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 don't contact me anymore.
Yes.
Don't contact them. You know, you might think like, oh, well, I got to be persistent, you know, da, 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 da. No, if somebody asks you not to contact them anymore, don't contact them. So it's even little things like that that people don't, you know, that we don't talk about, we don't realize. Right. So yes, you're right. We need to be informing our children like no means no. You know, whether it's no contact, no touching, no, you know, we have to set, you know, that standard in our homes. And then also talk about sex. You know, a lot of times when we think about these numbers, our children don't come to us when they've been sexually assaulted, whether they're little, whether they're teenagers, or even our friends may not tell us that they've been sexually assaulted because it's so taboo. Like sex is something that we don't talk about. And so if we already don't talk about sex in a positive manner, how are we going to talk about sex and let somebody know that we feel like somebody is assaulting us, right? So we have to start, you know, modeling appropriate sexual behaviors and having those conversations. Do y'all have those conversations? Y'all talk about sex with your kids?
I do.
Yeah, I do. I think also too.
My daughter doesn't want to talk about it.
Right. I was just going to say that they don't want to talk about it, but I think when you also preference it, that it's of safety concern, they may be more open to hear about it, because sometimes they get like, I don't want to talk about that, you know, when they're like tweens. And but it's really, but even starting from even younger than that, I started with bad touch, good touch with my daughter, right? Because I think that that's really easy for them to be able to identify what's a good touch and what's a bad touch, and they can use that language. So not from a sexual perspective, but from a safety perspective, is using that good touch, bad touch kind of language to help them understand and be able to identify what that would be like.
When my pediatric patients are old enough but young enough to understand, because I have to touch them all the time, I have to touch them, I always preface it by saying, no one can touch you. I'm only able to touch you because your mom or dad is in the room. And I mean, like every time that is habit for me, because even that kind of confusion, right? And I think about that. These little, they're vulnerable. I'm asking them to take off their clothes, right? And so I all the time, reinforcing. So at least they know, because their parents may not say anything.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So that's another thing, because you're right. Parents, parents for whatever reason don't feel comfortable having these conversations with their children. And then we get into these stats like we talked about. So even for our friends, being able to talk, because I think there's a lot of people our age that are in marriages where they're getting raped, but they think that they have to do it because, well, I'm a wife, so I'm supposed to do it, like even if I don't want to or whatever, or the partner might get aggressive with them, or the boyfriend or whatever. And, that's not okay. But society, like how they've been raised, they think that that's their duty, that's their obligation, they have to do it, and there's nothing that can be done again, about it. And when we're talking about consent, also thinking about, I see a lot of people not giving consent because they're intoxicated, and then the person being blamed because they are under the influence. That's another thing that I think that we need to have a talk with our children about, like making sure, like, what does that look like? How do you actually get somebody's consent? Because the next day they can say, I was drunk, or this, that, or whatever. And then you could be in trouble, facing a rape charge because you didn't actually get that consent. So, people think that, oh, you're making a big deal. No, I've seen it happen. I see that happen. So it is so important that you make sure that for sure 100% you've got that consent.
I want to say something to you about that, because Evie and I both teach in, a higher education, and whenever they go out, whether they're playing sports or if they are going to internships, they have to do the Title IX training, right? And there's this awesome video that the Title IX trainer does.
What is that, Title IX training?
Title IX, it's about like informing them about sexual assault and all of that. So it's a federal act that they have to be, that colleges have to inform their students about what sexual assault is. So they have an identified person that's like the Title IX trainer that does that. So, for college students who are athletes and for people going to internships, like all of these people have to be informed about sexual assault so that they aren't victimized or predators. So it's so funny when so each semester we place students into placement and as a social worker. And when we're placing the students into the internship and they're doing this training, or they may have some scholarship, or some athletes in there, it's so amazing how they're at that point and some of them are going, really? I didn't know that. And it's like, I'm glad that they're being informed, but I get scared. Like, well, what were you doing before that? Like, what was happening before? So were you victimized before that, or were you perpetrators before that? And it is really scary to get them and some of them are so like shocked that they're sitting there like, really? I didn't know that, and it's concerning.
And with Title IX, it's really interesting because I actually, not me personally, but I was called in for an interview on a Title IX violation. And it's really interesting now with cell phones and text messaging,
sexting.
So my experience with Title IX was very interesting, right? Because you learn, you already know, but when someone's being investigated and the questions it's every little bitty thing. It was like, I was told, this is the Title IX director asking me questions. Well, I was told you were present on this day. What did you see? And I'm like, what? And just little things. Did you notice such and such approach such and such? I'm like, what? So it's it's in how they approached the verbiage. So at the end of the day, I'm saying this, you have to be doubly aware and careful with everything you do.
Yeah.
Because I mean this on both sides too, right? Because you become a victim when you shouldn't become a victim. Like, Now, granted, I know there are people out there that lie. So let's take them out of the equation. But I don't think for the most part, anybody's going to bring an issue or situation to light and lie about it. But then as soon as you do that, the spotlight becomes on you too. It's crazy. And what did you do? Did you respond? Did you say this? Did you say that? And I was listening and I'm thinking, but like you said, like you have to have that education because you're not thinking of assault. You're not thinking that someone, because I don't know if you looked at the statistics, but assault normally happens by someone you know, right?
Most of the time, yes.
Right. So in that instance, you're not thinking, you're vulnerable and you're relaxed. So you're not thinking anything that you do or say can be misconstrued. Yeah. But that's where it's focused. Anyway, being involved with Title IX, oh my gosh.
Your guard is down, right? And I just want to emphasize that a lot of times your guard is down. You're not thinking, because most of the time the perpetrator is somebody that you know. So it's somebody that you're in a relationship with, or a friend, a family member, somebody that you know most frequently. So yeah. So I'm thinking, so like for prevention, education is key. And then another thing, like what you just mentioned, Uchenna, is listening and believing the victim. And so, yes, sometimes people lie, but in the beginning, if somebody is telling you that they've been sexually assaulted, we need to listen and believe them, validate them, and ask, like, how can we support them? And so many times I think that survivors of sexual assault, they don't get that support because everybody wants to know, well, what did you do? Did you try to stop it? And sometimes I even think about situations where I know this occurs frequently. It may be someone older and a younger girl, maybe, like kissing, maybe they're just messing around. And then all of a sudden, it turns into sex and they don't want sex. And then they get scared, right? And sometimes they freeze up and they don't say anything. And then they think it's their fault, but they didn't want, they didn't want to do it. They didn't know how to stop it. And they might've said no, or kind of like tried to push them off or whatever. And then, like they kept on. And then the young girl says, well, really, I didn't want to do it. And I was scared, but it's my fault because I didn't verbally say no, and then you get in those kind of situations. And that's where, learning how to communicate, learning how to say no. And people know how to choose their victims. They coerce people and they choose people that they know that they can manipulate, that they can get away with doing things like that.
Well, I think a major problem with just the whole thing with sexual assault and with people coming forward is, what's the punishment going to be? Like, what's going to happen if I tell you? Like, is nothing going to happen? Are they going to maybe get some jail time? Are they like, what's going to happen? So a person's going to be like, is it even worth me being embarrassed? People knowing my business, like my family knowing, and like the trauma, is it even worth it to say anything? Because what's going to happen? So those laws and regulations and all that stuff that that a perpetrator would be subjected to, like, that is a really big problem, because I guarantee you people don't say stuff because of that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Did y'all see, I mean, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say this like right in the setting, but you see the heat that's come down on Trey Songz, right? And about 2 or 3 years ago, Keke Palmer like went public with his inappropriate actions towards her, and she was shamed a lot. I mean, and I'm not going to get into details, but now all these years later,
that happens.
Somebody else wrote a song, put out what like Trey Songz is a predator, but Keke Palmer, like, I mean, if you may not even remember it, but she was ostracized for saying anything, and now they're doubling back saying, oh, maybe we should have believed her. And her career, like this affected her career. This like, anyway, I remember, and now someone else is validating, because it's happened to someone else who spoke out, is now speaking out. And apparently, and it's interesting, right? Because once it happens, and it takes two. Now everyone is coming out.
Really?
Well, it's big in the news right now about a football player. I'm not even gonna mention names. I think he's from Texas.
Well,
and he 22 massage therapists said similar things, but like he's cool. He's about to go.
Well, they're not indicting him. They're not indicted. They didn't have enough evidence to indict. So he's not being indicted at all. And he's getting 230 million, 180 million guaranteed for a new team. A new team.
So then those women there, those 22 women are like, should I even have said anything?
Yeah. And that's the problem, because it's just kind of like, racism, like in the court of law. It's very hard to prove, right? Like discrimination, like workplace discrimination or things like that. And sexual assault can be hard to prove too, So like if it was an attempted rape and not, a rape, that can be hard. If you're in a relationship, that's hard because, you're just feeling salty, you're trying to get them back or things like that. So yeah, that happens a lot. So, education, listening and believing the victims, and then stepping up when you notice that something is concerning. And I think as a society, that's where we're failing. I'm thinking in a lot of situations, we don't step up. We see things, and I think that we don't want to get involved. That's their family, that, and I think a lot of times, with, even if it's kids, we might justify, I don't want to say something in Child Protective Service, get involved and me be wrong, or that's their kid, or maybe I'm, and so we second guess ourselves and we don't step up. Even if it's our friend, something going on with somebody our age, well, they're grown, they're in that relationship, I'm not going to get involved, that's married people's stuff or what, what I mean? I'm not going to get involved in the marriage. I'm not going to get involved in the relationship. Oh, that probably didn't happen. I mean, he's a boy, that doesn't really happen to boys. We have all these excuses on why we don't step up. I don't know. What do y'all think? Do you agree? I mean, that's what I see. I see that's a huge problem.
I also see on the other side of it, be alert and be aware as individually as a person too. Don't let your guard down. I know that sucks. But the reality is, and this is how I feel, and I think Michelle feels the same way, there are way more predators out there. Way more predators.
Oh, definitely.
And walking around and it could be your best friend. I mean, you just have to be always thinking.
Yeah, always, unfortunately, and then try to eliminate putting yourself in a bad situation. Like if you're like a teenage, college age, and there's a party, but everybody's going, but then there might be a little bit of a rowdy crowd or this or that. You don't need to go. Okay, it's not worth it. If you even think in your mind, you even have a second guessing, like, oh, I wonder how it's going to be. Then you
don't. But here's the thing, Michelle. It doesn't even have to be a rowdy crowd, because that happens. So sexual assaults are so frequent on college campuses. So just, like in areas that you wouldn't even think about, like, when my daughter went to college, I would have to tell her, even going into your dorm, like at nighttime, you need to be walking with somebody on campus.
Right.
You never know what's going to happen. And we think that colleges should be a safe place because those are the good kids. Those are the kids that are in college. Those aren't the bad kids. No, it's happening all over college campuses. It's happening everywhere. I don't know if I necessarily, yes, it is a shame that we have to be on high alert and we need to be aware, but I don't like putting all the pressure on us as individuals. I think like on society, we need to be pushing for policy changes or an enforcement. Like we have to find. So
correct. But at the end of the day, it's a micro level thing that happens. Right.
It is a micro level, but I think that what Michelle was tipping on earlier is the consequences to it and the no tolerance for it. Because, even as you're saying, like my daughter's in college now, right? And a lot of the colleges, some of the parties aren't on campus because you know, the kinds of schools that they are. If they're, you know, a religious affiliated schools, they don't have parties like that. So a lot of them are in the frat houses or in the rugby house or in the this house. And so they're off campus necessarily. But I do gotta say that we just said that most of the assaults are people they know. So it's not like they're walking through the streets and somebody randomly attacks them.
Right.
That happens, but the likelihood of being sexually assaulted is more about people you know. And so it is about, you know, because I heard Michelle say that, and I'm saying that because they're going to go to a party. Mine is like, oh, she's a social butterfly, right? And so it's the things you say to them to protect them when they go to the party, because they're going to go. So I'm like, don't drink anything, like have your own stuff. So when you come back home, like hydrate before you get to the party. And when you get home, have your things so that, you know, like when I get back to my room, I'm already going to have my stuff. So I don't need to partake in anything here, because there is something that they inject into water bottles that, you know, you might think like, oh, it's spilled and it's like open some kind of weird, but they're injecting fluids inside of like water bottles. So even that, like, take your own water bottle, drink your own water, wait till you get home. You'll be okay till you get home. Like, it's those things. Thinking about who you're going to the party with. Are these people that I can trust? Keeping in a group, you know, all of those things are really, really important. But again, it's going back to the macro level. We got to push on people because colleges are horrible the way they handle, and it happens so frequently, the way they handle this. And see, me, I'm not dealing with public safety. I don't want to hear. I always tell my daughter, I'm not dealing with public safety. I don't want to hear it. I'm going to the police because they bumble this whole damn thing up, starting from public safety. Like, they don't have so we need to push for them to do more trainings on what they should do should there be a sexual assault. And that's where we got to push really on the consequences to this.
Yeah.
That's how I see it, because it is on a micro level that it's happening. But when you feel like I'm gonna get away with it because I am this person, I am the athlete, I am the student government, I am, you know, and it's happening on these and it's
my daddy has a lot of money.
Yes.
So I don't,
yes, because my daughter goes to that school, that kind of setting. And so there's already been certain talks. So I'm like, and show me. That's the other thing we need to say to them. Show me who these people are. Because when something came up, show me who that person is. Because as soon as I see them, like, I give them, I don't have to be nice. I give them the mug, like, okay, baby, you don't want this one. Okay. So it's that kind of level, because my daughter's like, oh, mommy, but he just, no. Show me who he is. Tell me his name, and I write it and record it, because anything popping happens, that's who I'm going for. Right.
Yeah. And you know how she says, oh, mommy, but he's just, you know, and that's the problem. A lot of times we are conditioned to think it's not that big of a deal.
Correct.
Well, they really didn't do anything. So a lot of times we second guess ourselves. Is it really assault, or am I being over dramatic? Because so often we get called over dramatic, right? But if it's anything that makes us feel uncomfortable, it's not right. Right. And that's something, you know, if we don't feel comfortable, we need to be talking to somebody about it. And even in the workplace, I see that happen a lot. You know, things are happening in the workplace, and then you may be afraid of getting a bad rep at work, or, you know, you're up for a promotion, and if you say anything, you know, you don't want to, you know, cause any waves or anything. And inappropriate things are happening that can be escalating to a sexual assault, but we don't say anything. Just like you said, you know, with people putting things in your drinks in work settings. You know, you can be on a business trip, and I know somebody that this happened to, and they got something slipped into their drink, you know, and then y'all go back to the hotel room together and not knowing what's going on, you know. I know people that have woke up the next morning and they know that they were drugged, you know, when they're, you know, on a
conference or something.
And then they don't know what to say. They don't remember anything. And so, so things like this, and it happens. And I guess I'm saying it because if it has happened to you, it's not uncommon. You know, it is happening frequently. So report it. You know, we got to report it. And then if we're involved in the process, we've got to believe and support the person reporting it.
And think about it. I mean, I with this show, I'm thinking about every person that I know that's been sexually assaulted. And if imagine, I know, and I'm at least 20 people, and I'm not exaggerating, from childhood. And so when you think about it, it touches all of our lives, all of our lives, friends, family, even distant friends, right? And we are the MUSE, we talk about trauma a lot, and we talk about long-term effects of trauma. So it's just, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm just saying we have to be the start and the change and support. And like you said, Sherelle and Evie, just political action, advocacy, because it could be us.
Mm-hmm.
It could be us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So any final thoughts for our DEN directives?
I say don't take things lightly, because sometimes it's even the language that people use, and although the sexual assault hasn't happened, but the potential for it to happen. So don't take that lightly. Write names, record names, tell people what this person has said, because that way there's a lead to start.
And start a conversation at home, like you said. Make what's uncomfortable and unfamiliar comfortable and familiar. Even if your children aren't comfortable in the beginning, if you make it a part, eventually they're just gonna be like, okay, right? And then also educate. I mean, like I said, I had to educate my husband, right? Just on that wasn't okay, right? So that education piece, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it.
Yep.
And you know me, I'm the non-trusting and all into preventative. So I'm like, just be aware, know your surroundings, know who's going to be around when you're hanging out, like the drink thing, all of that. Just be aware and take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Yes. So don't take things lightly, be aware, communicate, right? And then I'll just add on that, listen and believe, so we can support, the survivors of sexual assault, and then step in, take action, as you're supporting that person, take action at whatever level, whatever you can do. So that action can just be supporting a friend that's going through it and asking, how can I support you? That action can be, going to, a boss or supervisor and making a report with somebody. Or if you're observing it, making that report. So maybe it's not directly you, but you're going to report it to somebody, right?
Or even say, Evie, if it's a friend, I'll go to the police station with you.
Right.
I'll go to the hospital with you. Be there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes. And just let's start having these conversations. And the earlier we can start them with our children, the better it's going to be, because then we're changing that culture where we don't talk about that, where we accept it, where we think it's okay. So it is never too early to start talking to your children about appropriate sexual behaviors, the language to use, what consent is, good touch and bad touch, like Sherelle said.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today, and make sure you join us
in the den,
where places don't make you feel at home.
People do.
Bye.
Bye.